Hey, I'm Daniel, and this is the Filmcraziest show. Today's episode is actually an episode from the vault from when my podcast was known as Filmcraziest Interviews. I had this conversation with filmmaker Jesse Blanchard last November for his great puppet film called Frank Zed at the Nightstream Film Festival, and it wasn't posted as we were going to wait for the film's wide release. Though the release hasn't been announced yet, but it's currently playing at the Fantasia Film Festival, so we figured this was a great time to release the conversation, as it's available on demand through August 25th for Canadian film fans as it's geo-blocked to Canada. It's a fun conversation and a bit of a blast from the past for me, where my beard's a bit longer and my audio's a bit worse. I hope you enjoy it though, and I hope you get to check out the film as well. Here's myself to introduce Jesse. Today I am joined by the writer, director, producer of the new puppet film, like the puppet extravaganza, Frank Zed, but his name is Jesse Blanchard.
That's right. Hi everyone, nice to be talking to you.
I was curious just to start with not even with Frank Zed, but just with the short film at the beginning, Shine, just the 2-minute one. I love the visual, just of the idea of the shrinking spotlight. Where did you think of that?
You know, I knew that. So that was the first puppet film I ever did.
Okay.
Where I was like, I want to try puppets. Before I jump in, let's do a short film. And I love barbershop music. I always wanted to do like a barbershop horror short. So I couldn't tell you exactly where that idea came from, but it started with like a deep passion. I mean, I actually sang in a barbershop quartet. Like, that's how much I like barbershop. So the deep love of barbershop and puppets, which there's got to be some sort of like, I don't know, nerd triple crown I'm winning, because I also shot it in 3D maybe. So some nerdery hat trick from barbershop puppets and shooting in 3D. But anyways, so I'm not exactly sure where that specific part came from, but I know it just started a deep desire to do a puppet horror barbershop short film.
I was curious, what was your barbershop quartet named?
Well, their names are Kevin, JK, Red, and Gramps.
Okay.
And the barbershop quartet I was in.
Yes. Sorry.
Man. Yeah, that makes a hell of a lot more sense.
I'm too polite to correct.
No, it was in high school. I want to say it was the B Sharps, but I feel like I'm just stealing from The Simpsons, and I didn't know if we did that to be funny or not. It was me, a good buddy, and 2 women. I cannot remember. I know we actually won $200 at a barbershop contest, but I cannot remember the name of the group. Those are my dim barbershop memories.
Wait, they actually have barbershop contests?
Oh yeah, there's contests for everything. Everyone wants to go up against everyone else. There's a fascinating world of barbershop. There's some all-female barbershop groups that are really incredible. I mean, and that's like a niche within a niche. So, it's okay. I mean, it's the kind of thing, like, there's a whole thing in barbershop where there's just tags, right? Where you kind of sing just the final, and now goodbye kind of thing. But it's like these really cool, like, complicated barbershop chords. And barbershop groups will frequently end doing a bunch of these for fun. And it is like really fun. If you're into that kind of thing, it's like super, super enjoyable.
Okay. I almost want to just forget Frank Zed and just talk barbershop.
It's weird. Anything weird, I think, is just fascinating and is really hard to stop. I mean, that's why the internet exists, right? I mean, whoever is listening to this podcast has arrived at weird. And so if they kind of veer off into barbershop, they maybe wouldn't be too surprised.
Okay. Now, linking Shine to Frank Zed. Now, the Kevin and Gramps, they're the same characters in the feature, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the things that's fun is they get the same injuries from the short, and I believe even in maybe the same order. It's all like it's exactly the same. So if you know that and you watch it, it's like, especially like one of the most obvious ones is Gramps' foot and the other guy's arm, and then so they all get the exact same injuries.
You know what? I usually pick up on things like that, but I love Shine. I forgot about Shine, but that's brilliant, sir. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was one of the, it was like, I had to, right? They just kind of, and there's even a part where they kind of pseudo sing a barbershop chord just for a half second. But, you have to be careful because I'm kind of glad in a way, if you didn't pick up on it, that means the battle was more successful, that you weren't pulled out of it and thinking of Shine, that you were actually more in the moment. So I'm really glad that a second viewing, great. But on the first viewing, I just want you in the Orgy of Blood and not thinking about anything else.
Sure. There's that movie Sausage Party that ends with an orgy, but yours is a very different orgy.
I haven't seen Sausage Party, so I'll have to check
Spoilers.
that out. Okay,
I guess.
I can imagine some sort of buffet situation or who knows what else.
It gets really weird, but here it's fitting. I think. For people who don't know, could you just tell a bit about the premise of Frank and Zed?
Frank Zed is about these two monsters, a Frankenstein's monster and a zombie. They've kind of been rotting and kind of slowly falling apart in the ruins of their master's castle, who was killed centuries ago. And they have to work together to survive. Like, they were kind of designed so that they would die on their own, but they've just together, they're kind of holding, the final stroke of death just barely at bay. But even so, their bodies are crumbling and crumbling. So time is very slowly kind of inching up with Frank and Zed. And then you learn that basically their master was killed, and that there's this kind of curse that kind of hangs over everything that Frank and Zed don't really know about, right? And then, so one day the villagers kind of activate this curse or get everything going, and then Frank and Zed have to, face the villagers, and then also you get to learn a little bit more about their story. So that's the basic setup.
Okay, cool. I was very curious because obviously the narrative turns into very much a Frankenstein mob kind of narrative, but
yeah.
So I feel like there's always Frankenstein, but was it always a zombie, or did you want a different iconic movie monster?
The original idea, quite a bit of it popped in my head altogether. I knew there was a Frankenstein. I knew there was a zombie. I knew the Frankenstein monster had a glass dome, and that the zombie would kind of chew on it as if it was kind of gnawing, like a dog chewing on a bone, and kind of getting to the brain, but like not quite getting there. And I also knew that the Frankenstein monster was afraid of humans and feeding the zombie squirrel brains. And actually, in the original, the first draft, Zed kind of acted like a squirrel because he'd eaten so many squirrel brains, and that little bit, that came out. But I knew all of that stuff in the first draft, or in the first like kind of moment of inspiration, and all of that stuff, except for acting like a squirrel, all of that is in the finished film.
Okay, that's awesome. I love the character design. They both look great. So Frank looks different than everyone else. Like what he's made of. What was the puppet made of for Frank?
Yeah. So Frank, here I got him right here. I'll show you. Frank is Frank and Zed are both made out of silicone. So let's see. Hi, Daniel.
Awesome.
This is Frank. So his body is silicone. Then he has like a fiberglass underskull. And one of the things that's interesting about his design is his underskull is actually built so you can see it, obviously, right? And then we have like his eyes, which are also all handmade out of resin. And one of the things that's pretty cool, I don't know if there's enough light to see it, but like we make all the capillaries on his eyes are made by taking yarn and unraveling it and laying in a single strand of yarn kind of over and over again. And that's how you make the capillaries. And then, we make all the staples and things like that. All of that's made by hand. And then you make the teeth. And then, of course, you have the mechanism. So this is like what moves his eyes here. And it's all just done with these cables. So I'll see if I can bring him to life here. Oh, there we go. So you literally just kind of move these little levers, and that's what gets him to look around. And that's it. And so and you can see the other thing that's really hard is that because he's a puppet, he has no legs. He's just this torso, and that's it. And that's Frank. One of the things that makes the performance really difficult is you have a puppeteer doing his head or his mouth, right? And maybe one arm. Then you have another puppeteer doing another arm. If those fingers are going to move, which we try and move them in every shot, that's somebody else doing little things to move the fingers. And then if his eyes are moving, there's someone else just doing the eyes. So you have like as many as 4 or 5 people all working together to try and get a full performance out of Frank.
Wow. See, for someone who doesn't know much about puppetry, that blows my mind. That's awesome.
It's really fun. And it's one of those things, like, if you do it right, you don't notice. That's the whole goal, is that you would never. And that's one of the tricks with the puppets, is that there's a very fine line where they're alive and they're not just dolls. And so with every shot, you're really trying to do a whole bunch of things to really get that performance to come through and to feel alive, especially in a film like Frank Zed, which is 90 minutes long,
Okay. Yeah, and totally, they definitely look alive. Like, just the world looks so realistic.
Oh, thank you.
And I was very surprised to learn, like, a lot of this was filmed in your garage, right?
Well, there's kind of 3 spaces. So 15, 20 minutes of it, like quite a bit of it was filmed in a very small garage. And then we did a Kickstarter campaign that was successful. And that got us into like a pretty big space, at least big for us. And then the last of it, the miniatures, was built in about a 1,400 square foot studio. So we had, the film took so long, we kind of jumped around, but it very much started in a 370 square foot garage.
Okay, that's so cool. Like, scaling from that little garage up to like that big studio. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's shots in the film that are cut back to back in all these different spaces.
And it's seamless. You can't even notice.
Good. I'm glad.
Now, on IMDb, it lists this as animation. Now, for someone who doesn't know much about puppets, so like, it looks real, but it's animated in a way.
I've heard conflicting accounts on whether or not puppetry is animation, right? So some people say animation it's a photo of something and then moving it and taking another photo and another photo and another photo, right? And other people think that puppetry is animation. So it's actually, like, even on Wikipedia, it's not really settled. Like, to me, it seems like animation, but it is all live action. There's no stop motion. Like, it is someone's hand kind of moving all this stuff. So it's kind of both. I mean, it's like, it's undecided. I actually am not sure, like, if people count it as animation or not.
Well, what do you count it as?
I think, to me, it feels like animation because it's the illusion of life. That's what I think is important to me. And if you don't do it right, if you just move the puppet, it looks totally fake. So to me, it's like, I guess if you're just doing this and nothing's happening, then that's live action. If you're really trying to make it feel alive and bring it to life, that's my kind of personal definition of where it would come into animation, where you're really trying to make it real. But I don't think any, no dictionary will probably take my definition, but that's where I would hold it personally.
Okay, so like, yeah, honestly, I feel like yours is animation, but like something like Jeff Dunham's ventriloquism, like, that's just live action.
Exactly. And how would you choose? Exactly. How would you choose? So, I mean, one thing that is really rare about Frank Zed is that there's no humans in it. Like, almost all of the Muppets and Sesame Streets and things like that, and even like Labyrinth has a lot of human people in it. And that is one thing that's really uncommon about Frank Zed. It's very uncommon to have a puppet film done with just puppets.
I loved how it would blend like the real life props, just like with the axe. That's just obviously a real axe, right?
Yeah.
So that, I don't know, the merging of the worlds was cool for me.
Thank you. I mean, that was one of the things where there were certain rules, like the characters are puppets, but it's almost only kind of their skin. Because like as soon as they get cut, like they bleed real blooded guts, right?
Sure.
And then everything else in the world is real. That was the idea. It's like the characters happen to be puppets in a very real world with very real consequences. Like everything is 100% real, and there's one little stretch. These guys are puppets, but everything else is going to be as real as we can make it.
So maybe I'll just have you tell everybody what that beautiful stained glass is in the background.
Yeah. So we'll how about we'll do this? I'll do a real quick show and tell, and you can use what you want, and then we'll go in the house.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Daniel's audience, we're going to do a quick show and tell because I have terrible internet apparently. But before we readjust, let's show you some cool stuff before you're stuck in my boring house with just me. Okay, so this is the stained glass behind me. And one of the things with the film I really wanted to do is always making something new. So when we're in the castle, it's all rocks. We got very good at rocks. I said, okay, now when we're going to go to the village, I want something new. So stained glass became the thing that we used to really kind of try and show off the village. And so this was done, like everything in Frank and Zed is, it's all very analog. So actually what I have right here is the original drawing for the lower window, which you can't see, but you'll see we literally like draw and then do cut and paste, just kind of cutting out different elements and arranging it. And that's how we designed the stained glass here. And then, all right, here I've got one of the Shine puppets.
Yes.
So this guy is 10 years old, and this was like the very first set of puppets that I did the first short film Shine with, and he's in his costume right here. So hey, let's see here. I'll put him on for 10 seconds.
Yeah, show us your barbershop quartet voice.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to welcome to Daniel Prin's show. Dun, 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 dun. What's the name of your show, Dan? I couldn't remember.
Don't worry, Filmcraziest interviews.
That Filmcraziest?
Yeah, Filmcraziest interviews.
Okay. Let's see if I can do the eyebrow. See this? Welcome to Filmcraziest's interviews.
That's awesome.
It's amazing, right? Like as soon as it comes to life, even a little bit, it's so much fun. All right, Daniel's Filmcraziest, guys. And the last thing, I'll let you meet Zed too. All right. Here we've got Zed.
It's already coming apart.
Oh yeah. Hi.
Oh, wow.
So one of the things I did that was like really stupid, but is that Zed picks and eats his own brain, which I just thought was like so funny for a zombie, like the way a human would like pick their nose. And so you can actually see his head is empty, which is a really dumb way to design a puppet because your hand is supposed to go in there. But it's one of the things that I was really excited about was that I wrote the story totally ignoring that they're puppets, and so, but the other thing we did is his teeth are all on little bungees so that they would move around like this and just give him some extra life.
Oh, wow.
So if he bites, it just gives it like a lot of extra life.
So creepy.
Filmcraziest. That's Zed.
That is awesome. Wow. I love the eating the brains bit. That was funny though in the film. That was great.
Oh, thank you. That took I think that actually the first 24 takes, and we actually redid it because getting a puppet to pick a slimy thing out of its head and then eat it is almost impossible because it just keeps dropping it. And the other thing we had to do is I made 7 different kinds of slime to try and find a slime that would give me that one little strand. And so making something really slimy and gooey, getting the slime, and then getting the performance as the thing is moving back was like really hard. But I was like, we're introducing Zed. It's got to be good, you know?
Okay. Wow. That's awesome. Though about the quartet guy, like with the Nightstream intro, so that's your voice doing Grandpa, right?
No, that's my lead puppeteer, Jason Ropp, is doing Gramps, and then I do Kevin. So I do this character. I do this character in the intro, and then the old guy is voiced by my main puppeteer, Jason.
Okay.
So it's 2 of us. Although, see, this, like in that intro, what's happening is Jason, this is typical Puppeteer thing. So Jason comes in, he does Gramps, right? And then I bring Kevin in, you know, for the world premiere of Nightstream, right? Jason brings Gramps back in. But then Jason, when there's the typing is happening, that's me and Jason, because he's only has 2 hands. So then I put Kevin down, and when he goes through the typing, I take Gramps' hand and I help Gramps type. And actually, even in a bunch of the intro where whenever Gramps is moving his hand, which he does a fair amount, that's me doing all of that stuff while Jason does the other thing. And so we're switching back and forth in the background, you know, hopefully without anyone noticing.
Is there a lot of maneuvering, making sure no one notices?
Oh, absolutely. It's really, really hard. It's really, really hard because you have so even when Gramps first came in, when I first walked him in, I have to keep his hand down to keep the rod out, but without him raising his hand. So there's just a lot of kind of threading the needle, and you're doing it around all the props and stuff and around the other puppeteers. So it's very, very technical. Because like when I talked about Frank before, right? And like you got 5 people. Well, Frank is this big. So you have 5 people, one of which has his arm like all the way up to the elbow, all right there. So just kind of doing all of this kind of just getting all the people close enough. And then if you're actually going to move Frank, if he's actually going to walk, all 5 people have to move along with it. And you have to make it so that you have no idea that there's 5 people connected to this one thing.
Okay.
It's absurd.
You would never know. That's just so much goes into it that you don't realize. That's so cool.
That's the goal. So that's the best thing I could hear, because it was always like, we never want anyone to know that a human being is doing this. These are characters just doing what they're supposed to do. So like, for instance, there's a shot in Frank Zed. It's one of my favorite shots. It's an homage to Ray Harryhausen, where he's backing up and he's got a bat head, and he takes the bat head and he passes it from one hand to the next, which is very normal. If you're kind of like moving and you would pass one, well, that's a crazy effect to pull off, because he can't do this. So you have one hand and the bat head is like on a rod, and this hand brings it over, and someone moves the bat head perfectly into the other hand. And to get the physics where it doesn't look like the head is ever floating, like he's kind of doing that, and then the wrist is turning and all those other kinds of things. Meanwhile, his head is kind of moving back and his eyes are moving and the camera's moving forward, doing all of that together in a way with the goal being that you don't notice that he's handed it off, that no one would ever notice. That is when we've done it perfectly. And we fought, I think, 4 hours to get that shot.
Just a 10-second shot.
No, a 2-second shot, a 3-second shot, maybe. But that's what brings it to life. That it's every frame and every moment has. That's like for instance, Gramps' hand. Like I was telling you about the intro. It's amazing that you never went, wait a minute, how is he typing with both hands and talking? How is he doing that? Right?
Thank you.
So yeah, so when Gramps comes in and he's typing really fast, you know, a puppeteer may realize that, oh, there's 2 people doing that. But if we're really doing our job right, the audience has no idea. All they think of is like, ha, 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 look at the old guy type in this like semi-puppety way. That's the goal. And they can't see our hands. They can't see the rods as much as possible. You know, you could let a tiny bit of that creep in there, but the goal is always that the character and what's happening is far and away the main focus.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'll have you move inside if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
And like with the silliness of him typing, it really, I feel like since it's puppets, we're becoming kids again, and we don't care how they're moving, you know?
Yeah, well, there's a fine line, like the I almost never make a joke that they're puppets, right? In fact, almost every, that's one of maybe 5 they're puppet jokes that I've ever made. But it just works in that context for some reason. You know, it's a kind of, or maybe, I don't know, like, and that's something you just kind of feel, where I was like, this is going to work and it's going to be funny, and he will still be his own self. He'll still be a character, even if he's doing this ridiculously puppety thing in the moment, which is like very not puppetcore almost always. But it was just like, it was too funny. I was like, it's just too funny.
Yeah. And sorry, for those that don't know, Puppeteers is the name of your company, right?
Yes. Yeah, Puppeteers is like, yes, the name of the company, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Okay. And I also feel like it would be a disservice if I didn't ask this now, because I feel like I'm burying the lead a little bit, that you've worked on this film for 7 years. Like, what's it like putting all that portion of your life into this, and now it's actually getting reactions?
I've long said, like, if the movie works, it'll all be worth it, you know? So it's nice to feel like it was worth it, because there's definitely a big, you know, chunk where, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, especially who have helped me on the film, you're worried that they've just done all this work, and then people will be like, sucked. What an idiot, you know? But I think with me, it's like, one of the things that it's helped me realize is how much I love making movies. Because even after having made Frank and Zed, I can't wait to make another one. And there's been a lot of comfort in going like, well, this is what I'm going to do. Because even if it's absurdly difficult, I'll still do it. So yeah, but it's great. It's great. I mean, I think the other answer to that question is, this is very much the story I wanted to tell, and really specifically kind of the characters in the world. And there's like a warmth and a heart that is very important to me, that I was very excited to put in there. And I thought would be a bit risky, but a risk that I was excited to take. And I think that's one of the things that's been the most exciting, is to see how Frank and Zed as characters seem to be like responding to people, or people seem to be responding to them.
Okay, cool. And if you don't mind me bringing this aspect into the interview, because I understand it from our PR person, Ted, that you were a bit nervous about the reactions of the film and just negative reviews.
Well, I was, yeah. I mean, do
you mind me bringing that into it?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, the thing is, this is a film made with puppets where the lead characters don't talk, and you're trying to make it like heartfelt and emotional. Like, sure. It should fail. Like, a film like this should be so unwatchable that you like gouge your eyes out. Like, that's, you know, that is like the basic setup. And it is scary to be like, hey, audience, I want you to go there with me, that this fantasy world is real, that there's like all of this other stuff, and that these 2 guys that don't talk, that they're going to be, and who I'm really going to tell you, like, look how boring their lives are. Like, that's kind of like the point, that with all of that, we're going to try and like do a kind of heart on our sleeve, like emotional story. Like, all of that, it's scary. And it's scary to kind of bring it out into the world. So there absolutely was a fear that, as with any big thing that you do, you know, it's not like I'm the only one who has that fear, but certainly there is a fear that that it wouldn't work. But I think, you know, ultimately part of Nightstream and part of just bringing it out was saying, like, you know, it's time to just to take Frank and Zed out into the world and let people see what they think about it, you know? So even, you know, someone like yourself who does not have a strong affinity for puppets, say like, well, let's see if we can win Daniel over, you know, and maybe we could put a little bit of asterisks on his no puppet policy and say like, well, you know, it actually, this one was okay, you know?
No, yeah, I love this one. I love the monster movie, like love letter to the genre. I just thought that was great. And to your point about the emotional aspect and just them leading boring lives, I I thought it was very interesting how, and then this is my reviewer, my critic mind talking here, but I thought it was very interesting how there was tension in their codependency. Like, oh, what if Zed doesn't get to the lightning strike in time?
Uh,
I thought that dynamic was very compelling, I guess.
that's great because that to me, there's a lot of tension there, but you have to really pay attention to notice that stuff. Like if you kind of step away for even a second or something like that, or get distracted, it's very easy to miss, at least in my opinion, like you really have to be engaged with the film to catch that stuff, you know, because if you look away and then come back, it's just like, oh, they're doing this again. You're like, no, they're doing this again, but this tiny little thing is slightly different, you know? So I'm really glad that you like caught that stuff, because I did work very hard to build all that tension in. But it's not screaming at you. You have to be involved with the film, you know, to get some of that stuff.
Yeah, and hopefully people are glued to the screens and not going to get snacks and then coming back and like, what the hell? They're doing this. They were doing this again.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, you know, that's what you hope. But you know, I mean, that's one of the things I think, going back to your previous question, the other thing that was really nerve-wracking about Nightstream is that it's a virtual festival.
Sure.
You know, it would have been very different if people were seeing it in a theater. I would have had very few qualms, or it just would have been so much easier to trust that the audience is collectively going to be there, that they're really going to watch it. It does feel much harder to engage people in the same setup. They watch Netflix and email, and everything is kind of right there vying for their attention. They could be getting messages and all this other kind of stuff. And it was scary, or it was scarier premiering Frank and Zed in that kind of like super competitive screen versus like a theater screen where they're there and you're with them, and there's that collective energy that kind of comes into the experience. That part was also, that was a big part of what was scary about an online premiere. Yeah.
Though I was curious about, now this is kind of just getting to the bone of Zed's character, with a kind of a fun question.
Okay.
If he could eat one brain in the world, whose would it be? Oh
man, what a great question. I feel like I'm kind of vicariously thinking of whose brain I would eat.
To gain their knowledge.
Yeah, to gain their knowledge. I know.
Or just someone whose brain looks good.
I know, man, what a tricky question, because you're kind of like, well, if you go with someone old, they have the most knowledge, but then they probably have a bunch of plaque and stuff like that, you know, on their brain. Or do you go for like a young adolescent brain that's not like fully formed? I feel like you're kind of aiming for like maybe a 22 to 28. And then there's kind of like is there a service to the world depending on whose brain is eaten that you're trying to shoehorn in there? I don't know. I can't get past Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. I think part of the thing that's tricky about Einstein, or why I'm thinking about it so much, is, you know, his brain was actually removed when he died.
Oh, really?
You know, by like an amateur mortician. Yeah, so this guy had, I can't remember his name, obviously, but he had Einstein's brain, and people would send in requests for medical studies and things like that for some experiments. And he didn't really have any medical training, so he would just give away chunks depending on if he liked that person or not. So it's this really bizarre, kind of like hard to believe it's true thing that happened with Einstein's brain, and because Einstein very much wanted to be cremated. He didn't want to be, as he said, like, he didn't want his grave to be the site of like any morbid fascination. And yet his brain just totally against his wishes, that happened. So anyways, but eating Einstein's brain would just be, you know, sacrilege. So I can't get around like I can't wrap my mind around the one brain I that could not eat. So, I don't know. It's a terrible
Okay.
answer.
No. Honestly, if someone asked me that, I would have no idea. But I appreciate how much thought you put into it, because it was either, I think there's two kinds of personalities how they would answer that. Either you put so much thought into it like you did, or if they'll just say, well, oh fuck, man, Zed is a zombie. He'll eat whatever he can get.
I think on retrospect, yes, that would be a better option certainly for the conversation, but it's hard not to be like, man, that's a fascinating question. I think also because I know Zed, so I'm like, man, who, if he was really given any choice, who would it be? I don't know. I'll have to ask him.
Just a whole feast, just like I said, pick your poison. Which one looks best, right? It depends on how hungry he is, because he could just go for the squirrel brains, right?
Well, I think what's really interesting is that it probably wouldn't be a human brain, because you have like dolphin brains, and for instance, like an elephant brain has, I believe, more connections than the human brain. So it's like significantly bigger. There's like more neurons. I mean, I don't know what nutrition a zombie is supposed getting, but let's say it's synapse and neurons. Then an elephant would be like like the caviar potentially of brains. So Zed might be more like, why bother with humans? Let's get the real brains here, the big brains.
Oh my gosh, that's true. Like just the giant one that'll just feed them for a month.
Yeah. And that has like, all these different kind of neural connections that you don't necessarily find in humans I'm sure he'd find delicious.
That's awesome. Okay, great. Thank you for taking that journey with me of getting into the mind of Zed.
Great question.
So I was also curious about just to ask a couple more questions about the puppeteers. Now, so they're puppeteering on the day, and then I assume you put the voice work in later?
Yeah. So all the voice is added in later, because I'm talking through all the takes, coordinating things. So yelling and screaming, and that's really actually very important in order to get the performance to actually have all of us talking, not all the time, but frequently. There's definitely a world where we would record the voices on set, but there's also so much practical effects going on. It's really noisy. Like there's fans and there's fog machines and all this stuff. So it's actually really noisy as we're trying to bring everything to life, which makes what we call the scratch audio almost unusable. And in the final outtake credits, you can hear some of that. Sure. You hear me kind of yelling or laughing or screaming during some of those takes.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, because I was just curious, because I know it's an indie movie, not to offend your cast or anything, but I was curious if the Puppeteers were also voicing them, just because there's not, I didn't recognize any names, I guess, in the cast, but they do a great job.
Yeah. There's recognize or that are like household names by any chance, but there are quite a few characters that are voiced by people that aren't puppeteers. So for instance, like the black character Eben, it was important to me that a black actor play that character. Okay. And so Jerry Bell Jr. is someone who's like a very talented actor here in Portland, and so he came in and did the voice, but he's not a puppeteer. So that's like one specific example. And actually the same thing with some of the female characters where I wanted a woman to voice them, and but they were puppeteered by a man, but then a woman came in and did their voice.
Okay. Did you have a lot of female characters voiced by men here?
No, originally there was some, but I ended up bringing in no, I think all the females are now voiced by women. I had it initially just to get the kind of scratch thing done like really quickly.
Okay.
But yeah, the female characters are all voiced by women.
Okay. And then sorry, you didn't really cut out that much, but like for the first 5 seconds I didn't hear it. So sorry if you said this already, but okay. As you're yelling directions and stuff, are they doing the dialogue as well?
Yeah, everything's happening. So okay. Yeah, they're doing the dialogue, and I might say like, look left, or look right. I mean, not always. But a lot of times there's adjustments, or I'm talking to the camera, because everything has to be really choreographed for it to work. And the film has a lot of very complex sequences, like with blood and effects and things like that. So they might be saying a line and I might say, and blood, or something like that, to kind of go along to cue everything so the timing is right. Because the timing has to be really, really tight. That's one of the hardest things, is you rehearse, and you kind of get everything to work. And then you're rehearsing to make it faster, to make it just kind of come one beat right after the next. Because if it dips for even half a second, the whole film goes. And I try to do like a lot of long takes in terms of puppets. So that also has me kind of cueing things frequently.
And go into Henson and staying on topic of specifically like the puppets. But what started your love for puppets, or in that ilk? Was it like a specific film, or like a specific memory, or?
I mean, I think like many people, I just always loved puppets. I don't really have a memory of like not liking Sesame Street, or, not liking Dark Crystal, or not liking Labyrinth. Like I always really liked those things. But I think, to me, one of the things I love about the work of Henson, and I really try to very much replicate in Frank Zed, is that the characters are all real. Like you don't see the mechanisms. You don't see Kermit. Kermit was never really a puppet. He's Kermit the Frog. And if you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, he's a puppet, and definitely I think like with Dark Crystal, it's the same thing. Like I don't think of any of those characters as puppets. You think of them as who they are. And so it's something that I think for me, I just was exposed to so young that it was just like, it wasn't a discovery. It was just kind of always part of life for me,
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Strangely, I am shaping this interview like the film, where it's just all set up for the Orgy of Blood.
Okay.
And I have like I have four questions for the Orgy of Blood. So
okay.
I don't think anything we've talked about is spoiler heavy, but like the ancient weapons, like the mind bender, the props look great. Where did you come up with them?
That was always like, how do I make them different, right? So you kind of like, all right, an axe is pretty obvious. I want an axe. I thought the crossbow would be really cool. Like, all right, what's different from a crossbow? Oh, like a big hammer. That would be like really cool. And then I think Mindbender is obviously the most different, but part of that was also thinking about the character, and that the priest really wants to talk to people. He controls them with his mouth, and that's how he kind of molds their thinking. And I was like, well, for him, it'd be great if he didn't have to talk. If they just do what he says, he would like that even more. And so as a priest, kind of having the censer made sense. And then the mask, I thought like, oh, he'd have something to stop the smoke to protect himself. And so we kind of like, my idea was to basically kind of rip off like a samurai warrior, to have a bit of that look, with like the long kind of tongue being like a representation of his forked tongue. So it was really just kind of going, what's cool, what's going to be different, how can I show the audience like different things, and that was the answer that's how I came up with them.
So speaking about tongues, that's a weird transition, but there's a moment here where one of the puppets, it's like, try to bite me now, the whole jaw gets taken off. That looked awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was like for the Orgy of Blood, you're like, the kills have to stay entertaining, and they have to go up, 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 up. Like it always has to get more intense, right?
Sure.
And so that was really fun to have that sequence at the end. And I don't want to spoil who it is, but the character that sequence involves was very specifically chosen, because usually that character would have a different Orgy of Blood. So I was like, oh, no, he's going to get really close to it, like super, super close, but he's not going to have that fate that might be kind of the total cliche of horror films. And it was like, okay, well, how can we get him as close to that early demise as possible without actually having it happen? And that was, I was like, okay, that was, again, the answer is like, all right, he's going to get super close. And then I wanted to be super badass,
Okay.
but yeah. And it was also like, how can you just make something so gross? Like, how do you start the Orgy of Blood, like really gross and like gnarly, and that's where you start and you just go past it. Yeah, it was like really fun.
It's nonstop.
Uh-huh.
Was there ever a worry that it would, because it goes on for like 35 minutes, right?
Uh-huh.
Was there ever like a concern that it might be sensory overload?
It's always a concern. It's a concern now. It's absurdly long. It's a
Sure.
third of the film. It makes no sense at all. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's like the chance that it might be anything but a sensory overload was more the hope. It's like, of course, I mean, it's ridiculous, it's totally ridiculous. And in fact, and I knew that from the beginning, and I was like, but I was kind of like, some fans will be able to go with me the whole time. Like, some fans will be there and I'm making it for them,
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I thought about making shirts that said, I survived the Orgy of Blood, because it is just absurd. It's obscenely long. I mean, it's got to be, I mean, most like films that are like 2-3 hours don't have a 30-minute battle, don't have pure, in this movie, it's like a third of the movie is a battle. And so it was always a concern.
Okay. Now that you mention it, like the T-shirt, like I survived the Orgy of Blood. There's very much that scene in Scream, but the 40-minute party sequence. That's
yeah. That's a great reference. Oh, that makes me want to rewatch that.
Scream is probably one of my top 5 favorite movies. I love it.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Also, for the blood, what was it made of?
So lots of different blood, because it depends on the volume, really, right? Which is true, because there's times where you need like a slash of blood, like on set or something like that, or on someone's face. And there's other times where you need like a pump. And in fact, I could never get enough blood until I finally found like this thing that you use to like empty out a basement that's flooded at the hardware store. And it's like a bike pump that's just like high volume. And so for that, it would be, like water. But the secret here, I'll let your readers know, or audience know, the secret of good blood is chocolate syrup. So you do like a Caro syrup, you do your red food coloring, and it looks too candy-ish, right? But if you put the chocolate syrup, that brown is what gives the blood that kind of reddish, it just gives it the right color. So that's the secret. And we would use that kind of regardless if it was like more liquidy so we could have higher volume, or like really kind of tacky for a close-up. It's the chocolate syrup that gets you there.
Now, what was that like for the puppeteers who were down low and probably getting splashed by all of that?
Oh, I mean, we had a kiddie pool that the puppeteers frequently would sit in because there's so much fake blood. I'm not even joking. Like and I think in the outtakes you can see it sometimes. You see like the kiddie pool, and their like sneakers would just be soaked and squishy. And we had ponchos that everyone would try and kind of wear, because you just get absolutely hosed. And then when you're using like the Caro syrup stuff, it bakes in the light, because I'm a big, like I used almost exclusively tungsten light, because I think it gives you like a better, richer exposure. So it can be really, really hot. And these lights are people are just coated in Caro syrup and like baking in the lights. And then you walk around the set and you just hear like, because your feet are sticking to the floor like everywhere. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
Did you ever get in the kiddie pool?
Oh yeah. I'm in tons and tons of shots. There's lots of stuff where I'm like puppeteering or doing the blood, and also like directing and screaming like all the time, because it's always a chance to bring the shot to life a little bit more. Like if I'm there, I can add like more blood or another arm move or another puppet. So yeah, I'm in there plenty of times.
Okay. It really sounds like a lot went into the film in general, but specifically to the Orgy of Blood. So you took 7 years to make. How long did it take to do just that whole sequence, if you know?
So the Orgy of Blood, one of the scariest times in the film was taking the storyboards for the Orgy of Blood to my crew, because we averaged about 11 shots a day. And the first time I was like, hey guys, here's the storyboards for the Orgy of Blood, and it's 1,500 shots. And they were like, are you crazy? You know, you're really going to do 15? And it was at the very end of like this massive kind of shoot. And I was so nervous that they would just like run me out of town and be like, get out of here. We're not doing that. You know, you're crazy. You're crazy. And, but of course we jumped in. So the Orgy of Blood was done when we were in kind of a full production mode. And almost all of it was done, aside from some miniatures, in about 3.5 months of filming. But that's how long it took to do. Well, and what's tricky about it is like it's 11 setups or it's 11 like little tiny shots, because like a shot might be like a character might not finish a line of dialogue in a shot. You know, it's literally might be just a close up of a hand getting cut off. So it can be very, very small kind of little chunks. And then for some of the bigger things where, you know, like Frank cuts somebody's head off and they turn around and the head comes up and their blood and guts kind of come out, we might only do one shot in a day if it's that complicated.
Oh, wow.
Like we had many, many days where we only did, like, there's shots like in the graveyard that are really complicated where it was just one shot that day. That's it. It just takes too long to do more than one.
How many shots did it take to get the throwing axe with in the graveyard?
Oh, so where it's spinning?
Yeah, when the guy's like, "Oh, I'm the fastest runner in the village."
Yeah. So that was actually easy-ish. That was all about the setup. So that's someone spinning the axe like in front of the camera, right?
Oh.
So what's tricky about that shot is you have a puppet running here, so you have to create a forest that has enough space for them to run. You have to then figure out how the puppeteer can do that and kind of turn back. Then you have someone sitting on the dolly with the camera spinning the axe like this, but the margin of error where the axe is kind of spinning perfectly and you don't see how it's being spun is like very, very small. So you have to get the monitor up, down, left, right, sideways, and just to get the axe to spin perfectly like this and not like this or like this or like this or like this, all of which ruins the take, right? Because then all of a sudden the axe is like going this way. It has to be perfectly in line with the puppet, and then the puppet that's running has to look back. But then the other thing you realize is that, oh wait, this axe is moving. We're shooting in slow motion. It needs to be lit. So then you have to rig a light to travel with the camera and the person spinning the axe and light it in a way so you can see the axe, but that you don't realize that there's a flashlight right there or there's a light there. So that's the kind of thing that goes into doing that shot kind of over and over again to get like just those couple seconds.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I mean, I think those couple of seconds pay off. It's a good little moment.
It's fun. It's like, so yeah, it's like, I love that the Baker death scene is like one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It's so, there's one thing that I was always saying, it's like the perfect amount of dumb. And there is this line that we would always try and hit where something is just, it's not too dumb, but it's very dumb. You know, it's very, very dumb without being too dumb. And that was always like, we would say is, oh, there's a perfect amount of dumb. And I think that Baker like fits that like to a T.
I think so. And I'm just realizing the irony now is that since they're puppets, he probably is the fastest runner in the village.
Yeah. I mean, he's about the only guy that runs in the village. Everyone else just kind of marches right to death.
Oh yeah, and then just speaking of that's such a funny line with the 4 barbershop guys. When one's like, well, why do we come here every day? We're just gonna die in an orgy of blood.
Yeah.
So you have been very generous with your time, but I figure I'll just give you the space to. Do you have anything coming up, or do you want to plug any social media?
Yes, absolutely. So the social media stuff we're doing is all under Puppet Core, and we're doing a lot of behind the scenes things. And I've got another film that I've just finished my first draft on that I would love to go into production soon. And we're also going to do a bunch of, there's so much of the world of Frank Zed I want to share. So doing some things like what I would call, my favorite detail, kind of talking about different aspects we put into the film. But yeah, I'd love for any of your listeners or viewers that are interested in the movie to come join us at either puppetcore.com or just Facebook on Puppetcore.
So your next film is in the script stage. Is that a feature or is that a short?
It's a feature. Although I have been thinking about doing another short just because they're so much easier and I think it would be really fun. So yeah, so I got a feature and called The Gru that I'm very excited about, and was working on this morning, so I'm on page 88. It's too long. It's 134 pages, right? Or 133. So I'm trying to cut 13 pages out, but I'm on page 88. Once I get to the end, it'll actually finally go out to the first set of eyes other than my own to get some feedback, and we'll see what another human being thinks of it. But it's a story I'm very excited about.
Okay. Now the title, it doesn't have any relation to Despicable Me with the Gru.
No, I didn't even think about that. No, and I think he spells it GRU, hopefully.
Okay. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he does.
No, it's no relation to Despicable Me.
Okay.
I'm not sure I've seen Despicable Me, so hopefully I'm dodging a bullet on the name because I really like it.
No, I was just curious. Curious if you had any minions in the film.
No minions.
Okay. Well, maybe I mean, if you count Zed as a minion, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Frank and Zed, there's definitely minions in that film. Absolutely.
Sure. Hey, thanks again, everyone, for tuning into this episode of the Filmcraziest show. And if you've made it this far, I hope you do check out the film, which is playing at the Fantasia Film Festival and is available on demand through August 25th.